For decades, whenever Hollywood announced a gender swap in a remake, the internet lost its mind. And honestly, sometimes those critics had a point. A lazy gender swap is just stunt casting. But when it's done right, the result can be something genuinely better than the original. So in this video, we're looking at some examples that prove exactly that. 10 characters who were regendered and in the process, reinvented. Some of them sparked outrage before a single frame aired, while some of them quietly became the best thing about their respective shows. But all of them made a choice that, in retrospect, seems inevitable. These are the TV reboot gender swaps that actually worked. Starbuck, Battlestar Galactica. This is arguably the gold standard for gender swaps on TV. When Ronald D. Moore announced that Starbuck, Dirk Benedict's cigar-chomping hotshot pilot from the 1978 version, would be played by Katie Sackhoff, the backlash was immediate. Benedict himself wrote a scathing essay about this choice. And then the show aired. Sackhoff's Kara Starbuck Thrace didn't just match the original's cockiness and recklessness, she exceeded it, while adding psychological depth the original never attempted. Her arc across 4 seasons involved PTSD, faith, self-destruction, and sacrifice in ways that felt genuinely mythological. BSG proved that a gender swap done right isn't revisionism, it's expansion. Dr. Watson, Elementary. CBS's contemporary Holmes adaptation made a bold swing, casting Lucy Liu as Joan Watson, a former surgeon turned sober companion. It was controversial before the pilot even aired, dismissed as a cheap ratings ploy. But what unfolded over 7 seasons was something far more considered. Liu's Watson was sharp, autonomous, and refused to be reduced to a sidekick. She developed her own investigative identity independent of Holmes, eventually becoming a detective in her own right. The show is, at its core, about 2 brilliant yet damaged people who form an unconventional but genuine partnership. And making Watson a woman fundamentally shifted the emotional register of that dynamic. Kono Kalakaua, Hawaii 5-0. In the original 1968 series, Kono was a male character, a young detective played by Zulu. The 2010 reboot cast Grace Park in the role, and the character became one of the show's most compelling figures. Park's Kono is a former professional surfer turned rookie cop, and what makes the swap effective is how naturally it integrates into the show's ensemble. There's no point where the series asks you to notice that Kono is now a woman. The character stands on her own terms. And Park's physicality and charisma gave Kono an identity that had nothing to do with the original and everything to do with her own screen presence. Interestingly, years earlier, Grace Park played yet another gender swap role, Lieutenant Sharon Boomer Valerii on Battlestar Galactica. Higgins, Magnum PI. The original Higgins, played by John Hillerman, was a fussy British major domo who was constantly annoyed by Magnum's antics. Necessary, but rarely the most interesting person on screen. CBS's reboot cast Perdita Weeks and completely repositioned the character. This Higgins is a former MI6 operative, physically capable of going toe-to-toe with anyone, and carries the kind of quiet intensity that makes you wonder what she's not telling you. What the swap does most cleverly is redistribute competence. The new Higgins is often the most skilled person in the room, which rebalances the whole dynamic. And the will-they-won't-they tension between her and Magnum gives the show a central relationship with actual stakes. It's not a swap for its own sake, it's a structural upgrade that makes the show work better. Dr. Smith, Lost in Space. Here's one that works precisely because it ditches everything you loved about the original. In the 1965 series, Dr. Smith was conniving yet cowardly, a man whose incompetence you could laugh at. Netflix's reboot handed that role to Parker Posey, and what she delivered was something far more unsettling. Her Dr. Smith is a con artist whose charm is weaponized and whose motives stay murky for most of the series. Posey didn't soften the role, she sharpened it. The gender swap stripped away the camp and replaced it with genuine menace. You're never quite sure whether she's going to help the Robinsons or destroy them, and that ambiguity is exactly what the reboot needed. Beverly and Elliot Mantle, Dead Ringers. The 1988 film starred Jeremy Irons as twin gynecologists descending into psychological collapse, a cold, clinical horror about male power and bodily obsession. Rachel Weisz's miniseries remake keeps the twin gynecologists, keeps the dread, and makes them women. The result isn't a straight transplant, It's a thematic transformation. When women are the ones wielding obsessive control over reproductive medicine, the horror acquires a completely different dimension. The power dynamics shift, the institutional framing shifts. What was already disturbing becomes pointed. The gender swap isn't a gimmick. It's what makes the premise mean something new. Jennifer Goines, 12 Monkeys. Brad Pitt's Jeffrey Goines in the 1995 film is one of cinema's great unhinged performances. Funny, yet terrifying. When Sci-Fi's series adaptation cast Emily Hampshire in a gender swap version of the role, the question was obvious. How do you honor that energy without doing an impression? Hampshire's answer was to find something different entirely. Her Jennifer Goines is still erratic, still prophetic, but there's a sardonic wit and a strange warmth to her that Pitt's version never had. As the series progressed, Jennifer became arguably its heart, her apparent madness revealed as a kind of terrible clarity. Hampshire was allowed to take the character somewhere genuinely surprising. The gender swap created enough distance from the source material to let the character evolve, rather than simply repeat. Robyn McCall, The Equalizer. The original Equalizer starred Edward Woodward as a methodical ex-intelligence operative who helps people the system has failed. The 1980s series ran for 4 seasons and spawned a film franchise with Denzel Washington. CBS's reboot cast Queen Latifah as Robyn McCall, a single mother who's also a former CIA operative trying to balance vigilante justice with raising a teenager. That swap worked on multiple levels. Queen Latifah brought warmth and community investment that the stoic Woodward version never had, while situating the character as a black woman in America added layers of meaning to the premise. And Robyn McCall's relationships with her mother, her daughter, and her found family gave the show an emotional texture that distinguished it from its predecessors. Rob Brooks, High Fidelity. The 2000 film centered its heartache around Rob, a self-absorbed record store owner cataloging romantic failure with defensive irony. It's a very specific kind of male emotional immaturity dressed up as cultural intelligence. Hulu's 2020 series cast Zoe Kravitz in the role and relocated the story to Brooklyn. And here's what's interesting. The character's flaws didn't soften. Rob was still self-obsessed, still unwilling to fully commit, still using music as emotional armor. But a woman who behaves this way on screen carries different social weight. Audiences and critics have different expectations, which means the same emotional immaturity reads differently. Kravitz is magnetic in the role, and the series found something fresh in the premise precisely because it refused to rehabilitate Rob into someone more palatable. Pidge, Voltron Legendary Defender. In the original Voltron series, Pidge was a young male pilot. The Netflix reboot revealed Pidge to be Katie Holt, a girl who disguised her identity to infiltrate the Voltron program and search for her missing family. It's a swap with genuine narrative purpose. The disguise became plot, the revelation became a character moment, and the truth of who Pidge is shaped her arc throughout the series. She's defined by intellect, mechanical genius, and fierce loyalty, none of which are gendered, but all are celebrated. Pidge resonated as a character whose gender was both meaningful and secondary. Meaningful because her story depended on it, secondary because her competence was never in question. It's an example of a gender swap that doesn't just change who a character is, but finds a reason for that change to matter to the story being told. 10 swaps, 10 cases where someone made a decision that looked risky on paper but landed on screen. Now, we want to hear from you. Are there any we missed? Which gender swap in a TV remake do you think genuinely deserved a spot on this list? Also, if you enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button. And if you want to keep going, check out TVShowPilot.com for more deep dives on all your favorite shows.